In the dusty heart of rural Montana, where the wind carries secrets across endless prairies and the sun sets like liquid gold over weathered ranches, there lived a man named Jack Morrison. He was 34 years old, with calloused hands that told stories of hard work and eyes that held the weight of broken promises. Jack had always been a simple man, content with his cattle ranch, his solitary life, and the rhythm of seasons that governed his existence. He had married once, to a woman named Sarah who seemed to love the idea of ranch life more than the reality of it. Their marriage lasted 3 years before she left one autumn morning, leaving nothing but a note on the kitchen table and the echo of her absence in every corner of their home. Jack had spent the next 5 years rebuilding himself, brick by brick, finding solace in the work that consumed his days and the silence that filled his nights. He told himself he was better off alone, that he didn't need anyone else to make his life complete. His ranch hands respected him, his neighbors trusted him, and his cattle thrived under his care. It was enough, or so he convinced himself every morning when he woke to an empty house and every evening when he sat alone at a dinner table built for a family he'd never have. Everything changed on a Wednesday afternoon in late September when Sheriff Tom Bradley pulled up to Jack's ranch in his patrol car, dust trailing behind him like a wedding veil. Jack was mending a fence in the south pasture when he saw the vehicle approaching, and something in his chest tightened. Law enforcement never brought good news to these parts. He wiped his brow, set down his tools, and walked toward the house, his boots crunching on the gravel driveway. Tom stepped out of the car, his expression grave, and behind him, Jack could see 2 small figures in the back seat, pressed together like frightened birds. Tom explained the situation in his straightforward way, though his voice carried an unusual gentleness. Jack's cousin Michael, whom he hadn't seen in over a decade, had died 2 weeks ago in a car accident in Nevada. Michael had been married to a woman named Crystal, a cocktail waitress he'd met in Las Vegas during one of his many attempts to escape his past. They had twin daughters, Emma and Lily, who had just turned 6 years old. After Michael's death, Crystal had tried to manage for exactly 9 days before deciding that motherhood wasn't in her cards. She had driven the girls across 3 states, shown up at the sheriff's office that morning, provided Jack's name as the only living relative, signed temporary custody papers, and disappeared before lunch. The girls had been sitting in child services for hours, clutching each other and refusing to speak to anyone. Jack felt the ground shift beneath his feet. He wasn't father material. He didn't know the first thing about raising children, let alone twin girls who had just lost their father and been abandoned by their mother. He opened his mouth to protest, to explain that there had to be someone better suited for this, someone who knew about braiding hair and bedtime stories and whatever else little girls needed. But then Tom opened the back door of the patrol car, and Jack saw them clearly for the first time. They were identical, with tangled blonde hair that caught the afternoon sunlight, wide blue eyes that held too much fear for such small faces, and matching denim dresses that were 2 sizes too big and stained with what looked like ketchup and tears. They held hands so tightly their knuckles were white, and they looked at him with an expression he recognized all too well because he'd seen it in his own mirror after Sarah left. It was the look of someone who had learned too young that people leave. Jack heard himself saying yes before his brain could catch up with his heart. He signed papers he barely read, accepted grocery bags filled with the girls' few possessions, and suddenly found himself standing in his driveway with 2 6-year-old strangers who were now, somehow, his responsibility. Tom offered him a sympathetic pat on the shoulder and some advice about patience and routine, then drove away, leaving Jack alone with Emma and Lily. The 3 of them stood there for what felt like an eternity, the silence broken only by the wind and the distant lowing of cattle. Jack cleared his throat. He crouched down to their level, his knees protesting, and tried to smile. It probably looked more like a grimace. He told them his name, that he was their daddy's cousin, and that they were going to stay with him for a while. Neither girl spoke. They just stared at him with those enormous eyes, and Jack felt completely and utterly out of his depth. The first night was a disaster. Jack made spaghetti because it was the only thing he could think of that kids might eat, but he forgot to cut it into smaller pieces, and the twins just pushed it around their plates without taking a bite. He showed them to the guest room, which he'd hastily cleaned while they sat on the living room couch, and realized he didn't have proper beds for them, just a double bed with sheets that smelled like storage. He didn't have nightlights or stuffed animals or any of the things he imagined children needed to feel safe. When he tucked them in, they clung to each other in the center of the bed, and Emma, the one with a small scar above her left eyebrow, whispered so quietly he almost missed it that they were sorry for being trouble. Jack felt something crack inside his chest. He told them they weren't trouble, not even a little bit, and he sat in a chair by their door until they finally fell asleep, which took hours. The following days were a series of small catastrophes and tiny revelations. Jack learned that Emma was afraid of the dark and that Lily refused to eat anything green. He discovered that they had nightmares almost every night and that the only thing that calmed them was being allowed to sleep together, wrapped around each other like puzzle pieces. He found out that neither of them had been to school regularly and that their previous life had been chaotic at best. A series of cheap motels and temporary apartments, fast food meals and long stretches of being left alone while Crystal worked or didn't come home at all. They had learned to be invisible, to take up as little space as possible, to never ask for anything because asking meant disappointment. Jack did his best, which felt woefully inadequate. He enrolled them in the local elementary school, bought them new clothes from the general store in town, and tried to establish some kind of routine. He woke them at 7, made breakfast that often went uneaten, drove them to school, worked on the ranch, picked them up at 3, attempted dinner, supervised bath time with the awkwardness of someone defusing a bomb, and got them into bed by 8. It was exhausting in ways that physical labor had never been. His ranch hands noticed the change in him, the way he rushed through tasks to be home by afternoon, the way he kept his phone in his pocket in case the school called, the way he looked perpetually worried and sleep-deprived. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. It started small. 3 weeks in, Lily asked if she could have seconds at dinner. A few days later, Emma laughed at something silly Jack did, a genuine laugh that sounded like wind chimes. They started leaving their bedroom door open at night. They began to explore the ranch, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Jack showed them the horses, the chickens, the barn cats that scattered like dandelion seeds when the girls approached. He taught them how to collect eggs, how to brush a horse's mane, how to whistle through grass blades. He wasn't good at the things he thought fathers should be good at, like helping with homework or braiding hair, but he discovered he could teach them about the land, about animals, about the kind of honest work that connected a person to something bigger than themselves. The twins began to differentiate in his mind beyond just Emma's scar. Emma was the bolder one, the first to try new things, the one who asked questions and demanded answers. Lily was quieter, more observant, the one who noticed when Jack was tired or worried, and who would slip her small hand into his without saying anything. They both had Crystal's blonde hair and Michael's stubborn chin, but they were becoming their own people before Jack's eyes, unfolding like flowers that had been kept in shadow too long. Winter came early that year, blanketing the ranch in snow and transforming it into a Christmas card scene. Jack had never paid much attention to holidays, but the twins changed that too. They made paper snowflakes that covered every window, sang carols they'd learned at school in voices that were slightly off-key but full of joy, and asked with barely contained excitement if Santa knew where they lived now. Jack found himself driving to town to buy a Christmas tree, decorations, and presents he carefully hid in the barn. He stayed up late on Christmas Eve, assembling a dollhouse that had far too many pieces and instructions written in what might as well have been ancient Greek. When the girls came downstairs Christmas morning and saw the tree surrounded by gifts, their faces lit up with wonder so pure that Jack had to turn away because his eyes were suddenly burning. But the most profound change happened gradually, in moments so small they might have been insignificant to anyone else. It was Lily bringing him wildflowers she'd picked near the creek, their stems clutched in her sweaty hand. It was Emma running to him when she fell and scraped her knee, trusting him to make it better. It was both of them fighting over who got to sit next to him at dinner. It was the morning he woke to find them both in his bed, having climbed in during the night, seeking the comfort of his presence. It was the first time Emma called him Uncle Jack, then later just Uncle, then one day, tentatively, testing the word like it might break, Dad. It was watching Lily master riding a bicycle, her blonde hair flying behind her as she pedaled in wobbly circles around the yard. It was Emma's school play where she played a tree and took her role with utmost seriousness. It was 1,000 tiny moments that added up to something he had never expected to have, a family. Jack realized one evening in early spring, as he watched the twins play in the yard while he prepared dinner, that they had saved him as much as he had saved them. His life before them had been empty in ways he hadn't fully understood, a hollow existence of routines that led nowhere and silences that echoed with loneliness. They had filled his home with noise and chaos and laughter. They had given him purpose beyond the day-to-day maintenance of his ranch. They had taught him that love didn't have to make sense or follow the paths you expected. Sometimes it showed up in the form of two terrified little girls in a sheriff's patrol car, and sometimes it grew so naturally that you couldn't remember what life was like without it. The legal proceedings took months, but eventually, Jack was granted full custody. Crystal never contested it, never even responded to the court notices. Michael's parents, Jack's aunt and uncle, had passed away years ago, and there was no one else. The judge, a kindly woman who had seen too many sad cases, smiled at Jack when she signed the papers and told him that sometimes the best parents are the ones who never plan to be parents at all. Jack brought the girls to the courthouse that day, and when the judge officially declared them his, Emma and Lily hugged him so tightly he could barely breathe. They celebrated at the diner in town, where the twins ordered chocolate milkshakes and burgers, and Jack felt lighter than he had in years. The waitress, an older woman named Betty who had known Jack since he was a boy, winked at him and said he looked good with kids, that fatherhood suited him. Jack glanced at Emma and Lily, who were giggling over something only they understood, their heads bent together in that way twins have, and he thought that maybe Betty was right. He had spent so long being alone, being the man who needed no one, but these two girls had cracked him open and shown him that there was a different way to live. As the months turned into years, Jack watched Emma and Lily grow from frightened 6-year-olds into confident, loving children who were as much a part of the ranch as the cattle and the land itself. They helped with chores, learned to ride horses, excelled in school, and filled the house with a kind of joyful chaos that made everything worthwhile. Emma developed a fierce love for animals and declared she wanted to be a veterinarian. Lily discovered a talent for art, covering the refrigerator with drawings of the ranch, the horses, and the three of them together as a family. They still had hard days, moments when they remembered their father or wondered about their mother, but they had Jack, and he had them, and that was enough. Jack often thought about that September afternoon when Tom Bradley had pulled up his driveway with two scared little girls in the back seat. He remembered how close he had come to saying no, to insisting there must be someone better equipped for this responsibility. He marveled at the twist of fate that had brought them to his door, the cosmic coincidence that had transformed his life completely. The twins were his everyday miracle, the unexpected blessing he never knew he needed. They had taught him that family wasn't just about blood or planning or being ready. It was about showing up, about choosing to love even when it was hard, about opening your heart to the possibility that broken things could be mended and that lonely people could find each other in the most unlikely ways. Every morning when he woke to the sound of their laughter, every evening when they fell asleep reading stories together, every moment of every day, Jack thanked whatever force in the universe had decided that these two girls belonged with him, and he with them.